Hey folks, how you doing? It is Wednesday, the whatever of September 2025. I think it's the 17th. Yeah, yes, the 17th. Pardon my cough. Coming to you live from Northern Israel with another episode where I talk about stuff, and in this case, about the timeless truths of Bitcoin and altcoin cryptocurrencies. To be clear, there are a significant number of timeless truths that one may tell about Bitcoin and cryptos. One of those timeless truths, let's right off with it, is the most valuable one, which is the ability to send and receive transactions uninterrupted, or unhindered. Right? The ability to send values, to transact values of whatever type they might be, with anybody else who has a wallet, unhindered by middlemen, is very probably the greatest timeless truth about Bitcoin and true decentralized cryptocurrencies. Now, the reason I qualify that as true decentralized cryptocurrencies and not just all cryptos is because there are many cryptos that are not actually decentralized. And even though they may work now and they may seem wonderful now, the fact that they're not decentralized, um, well, that means that there is actually a middleman, right? So, but yes, Solana is great and wonderful. I like Solana a lot, don't get me wrong. Solana and a bunch of meme coins on it, they're fantastic. But they're not actually true decentralized cryptocurrencies. And they don't need to be, right? They don't have to be. Not everything has to be everything. Bitcoin does one particular thing very well. It actually does more than one, but it does something very well. Litecoin also does that same thing, actually, just as well. But other cryptocurrencies, that may not have the same sort of view of how things ought to be with their system, they have different protocols in place, right? So Solana, not decentralized. XRP, arguably, it is decentralized, right? So we'll give it that, right? Because I know there was this big debate in the earlier days of XRP. It wasn't decentralized, and it's true, it wasn't. But now they've distributed that giant silo of XRP that they were disbursing every month, and it is now, in fact, decentralized. Cardano, obviously, decentralized, and unlike Bitcoin, but like Litecoin, Cardano and Litecoin are both still largely held by retail holders, as are a number of other coins, but among the big five that are in the digital asset reserves, it's basically Cardano that is the one that's that's decentralized and still held mostly by retail people. Right? If you look at Ethereum, it's not. It's largely held by institutional money, right? Governments, big banks, big corporations, whatever. That's who largely holds Ethereum. That's also who largely holds Bitcoin. And yes, so that means that Bitcoin and Ethereum and frankly Solana, but and even XRP are largely held by institutional money. And you could say, well, doesn't that make Bitcoin not decentralized because there's so few wallets that actually hold most of it? You can make the argument that that's the case. It's not really accurate because it's not really what it means to be decentralized. What it means to be decentralized in that sense is a very different thing. Um, we're talking about the decentralization of the network protocol, which is the miners who actually mine the Bitcoin. Right? And in that sense, Bitcoin is the most decentralized network. Right? But then you could say, well, but all the miners are big mining corporations. There's very few people who are actually individually mining. That's actually not true. Yes, the large miners have the abundance or the overwhelming amount of hash power that is mining Bitcoin and securing it, but there are actually plenty of individuals who are mining it out of the number of miners that exist on Earth. So yeah, let's just say the number is 10,000 miners. Okay, some of them have one or two computers, some 100,000 computers. It all depends, and everything in between. So there's many different types of miners, different size corporations, etc., that are running it, or individuals that are mining it. Right. Another timeless truth of Bitcoin and crypto is that Bitcoin, and I say Bitcoin and crypto because I mean Bitcoin and altcoins. Yeah, Bitcoin and altcoins have another timeless truth, which is that they are extremely portable. You can literally remember your passphrase, your seed phrase, whatever you want to call it, recovery phrase, etc., etc. If you can remember that, you can travel around with your money in your head and not even need a hardware wallet. And that's in fact the safest way to carry it, for example, across borders. But because then you have nothing to find. If they search your bags or whatever, you don't even have a hardware wallet. And if they search your computers, you don't even have a software wallet. Now, the risk, of course, is that if you just remember your password, you don't have it written down safely somewhere, you could lose access to it. If you forget the phrase for some reason, maybe you got sick and you can't remember something, or you got hit in the head, or, something happened to you. You were locked away in some hellscape room for 3 months and you forgot everything and you don't remember the password to your account, to your Bitcoins or your crypto. Well, then, yeah, it's quite possible you could lose your phrase, which is why, even though a brain wallet, as it's called, is great for security in the moment, it's not necessarily good for long-term security. In fact, I'd say it's very dangerous for long-term security because there's a probability that is greater than zero. And as you get older and older, that probability keeps increasing as time passes, that you will forget it or lose access in some way. There'll be some reason why you can't remember it. And that puts your entire stack at risk. So don't do that. Right? Instead, if you're going to remember your wallet, which is fine, make sure that you secure it in some other way for long-term access. Even if you do something like you take your passphrase, split it up into little pieces, and you secure those pieces in different locations just to keep them safe. And so that if anybody ever finds a piece, they can't, they don't have your whole phrase, right? It's definitely something you want to be doing in order to keep the phrase secured for the long term. Hey, what's Dev? I don't know what that says, Dev Chuti, but anyway, what you want to do, right, is to secure it in multiple locations, even broken up into pieces. And let's see, another portable truth, another timeless truth about Bitcoin and crypto is that Bitcoin and cryptos are divisible. You don't actually have to have an entire Bitcoin or an entire Solana or an entire Litecoin or an entire ADA, which I know sounds ridiculous given how cheap ADA and XRP are relatively, right? They're divisible into millions and millions of units, right? Like Solana is divisible into a billion lamp ports per Solana. Litecoin is divisible into 100 million lights, just like Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million Satoshis, right? So they're very divisible, and they're actually divisible even further than that. And there are, micro Satoshis, etc., milli Satoshis. So it is divisible further than a Satoshi. Why is that important? Well, because if some crazy future ever exists where, Bitcoin reaches $1 billion, right? Or $10 billion, or whatever it is, right? At $100 million, each Satoshi would be worth $1. By then, who knows? Maybe the U.S. dollar system will not even be using pennies anymore. They'll just get rid of them because the dollar will be so devalued by then. But if it ever reached 100 times that, right? 100 times 100 million, which would be $10 billion per Bitcoin. Well, then the situation would be that each Satoshi would be worth a penny. So if it was ever worth more than that, you would probably want to be, I know it sounds crazy to think of $10 million Bitcoin. What are you talking about? It's not impossible. And yes, it's insane to think that now, maybe, but it's not impossible. That's why divisibility matters, because we may have to divide Satoshi someday. Maybe not. Maybe it'll never be a necessity, but it could very well be reality at some point. Anyway, that's going to do it for now. Talk to you guys later. I'll tell you more timeless truths about Bitcoin and crypto in another video.